From the moment we started, we knew there was something special about it.
There was a feeling that this was going to be not just another run-of-the-mill war movie.
It was like an opportunity for a great breakthrough for a black actor at the time.
Robert Aldrich, the director, he was kind of a tough guy.
He wanted it to be as authentic as he could make it.
He wanted to make a war film that was ugly, that was brutal and vicious, and nobody was good.
Dirty Dozen shows you that wars ain't nice things.
It was a fine, fine film, even though people did say that it was horrific and everything else.
Up through, let's say, the mid-1940s, up to the end of the war films were essentially about the squad, about a group, about Americans working together to win the war.
If you think of any traditional mainstream movie made right after World War II, that was all about, if you will, properly memorializing the sacrifice that so many people made to win that war.
Then you started getting more reflective films about the war and what was going on in the war. You had something that people were a little hesitant about at first, like The Desert Fox, where all of a sudden we were supposed to see the German enemy as a hero in some way. And so the shifting grounds of the war film into the 50s changes the attitudes towards the war.
By the time you get to Dirty Dozen, it's really about something else. It's about people who really just want to survive the war.
With the demise of the code office, you had the ability to use four-letter words, which gave more realism to the films than you had had up to that point. By the time you get to the Dirty Dozen, they can get away with a lot more.
My first novel is The Dirty Dozen, and I had about 500 some odd pages finished and had long since run out of money. So I had the West Coast editor of Dell and Random House take it and get me a motion picture option.
Aldrich had tried to buy The Dirty Dozen before it was published, but MGM had purchased the rights.
And then finally he was brought onto the project by Kenneth Hyman.
MGM said, "We own a book. Would you like to produce it?" I read the script. I said, "It's interesting. I like it. But if you want me to do it, I want to start from scratch. I'd like Nunnally Johnson to do the screenplay." To make a long story short, Nunnally Johnson was signed to do the script. I then went after a director, and I knew Aldrich because we had done Baby Jane. I was executive producer on that. He had an ornery quality that I liked a lot. He was his own man. He was terrific with actors.
Aldrich, of all of the great directors I knew how to deal with an individual on that individual's basis.
He was the kind of a fella, all man, very quiet, soft-spoken. People jumped when he, said, "Jump."
He was a tough guy. He'd been around. After all, this is a guy who managed to control Bette Davis and Joan Crawford in a movie. Baby Jane.
I think Aldrich obviously had, if not a reputation, at least could demonstrate from his previous films that bringing together a group of actors and staging ensemble scenes was something that he was comfortable doing.
I think you must cast a director like you cast an actor, and I thought he would be superb casting for the movie. Happily, he liked what he saw and said, "Let's go."
Deal was a good one from Aldrich's point of view, not only in terms of the money, but also in terms of the creative prerogatives it gave him. He had cast approval. He went in saying that he needed to rewrite the script.
He wanted to bring his writer, Lukas, in to do a polish.
Aldrich read the script, and while it was well-crafted, it was, he thought, a 1945 war movie, and that's not what he wanted to make. So what he asked from Heller was to essentially make it reflect a lot of the concerns of 1967.
And in reworking it, they turned it into this sort of anti-authoritarian, anti-war movie.
In casting a project like this, I think Aldrich understood that he had to cast from a diverse group of actors that would indeed reflect the diversity of wartime.
I think the fact that the part of Major Reisman was originally offered to John Wayne is intriguing, and also it's intriguing that John Wayne turned it down.
Afterwards, Aldrich was accused of not wanting Wayne because of his politics, and Aldrich pretty straightforwardly said that's not what mattered to me. It was Wayne's on-screen persona.
He knew John Wayne would, first of all, change the whole tenor of what became Lee Marvin character.
I think we were very lucky to get Lee. At the end of the day, Lee was better than Wayne would have been.
Lee Marvin brought a commitment to the character and brought something to that character which John Wayne wouldn't have brought the same thing to it.
Lee Marvin was all Marine. I mean, he was a Marine. That was it, period.
Lee was a great person, very bright, and very strong, as he would have to be to lead that group of men.
When The Dirty Dozen came about, Robert Aldrich had certain actors that he was very fond of and they would use again and again. Ernest Borgnine was one of them.
I was making McHale's Navy at the time. And I had to get back from McHale's Navy, but this fit into the thing just perfect so that I could go to England, make the film, and come back and still be in time to start shooting McHale.
Ernest Borgnine is interesting because Ernest Borgnine has always been sort of an alter ego for Aldrich. He looks a lot like Aldrich. And so he in many ways, he sometimes plays his alter ego, and you see it a little bit in The Dirty Dozen. When he's running the meetings, that's the way Aldrich sort of ran meetings, you know, with a drink and sort of this, yeah, I'm following the rules, but I'm not really following the rules.
I was involved with The Dirty Dozen because I had worked for Robert Aldrich. He was a friend, and he gave me a shot at things when I was first starting out that were very meaningful for me. Originally, I wanted to do the part that Telly Savalas did, the crazy nut, and Aldrich said, George, believe me, you could play the Savalas part, but Savalas couldn't do what I need you to do. So it was a very nice compliment. I would have worked for him anyway.
Aldrich liked to use people on two ends of it. He liked to use people who were older, who had established names, like Robert Ryan and Richard Jacob. But he also liked to get people who were sort of maybe down on their luck, or people who were just giving them a little bit of a start. And so you have the case of like John Cassavetes, who started the independent film movement. But he'd always been sort of put aside. He hadn't worked much because he was temperamental, because he had that whole sort of independent attitude.
Cassavetes didn't want to do the movie. He wanted to direct a movie. I had almost a fist fight with him to cry. He'd say, Johnny, for God's sakes, this is a wonderful role. Do the movie. Put the money in your pocket, then make your movie. And he almost didn't do it.
I remember Lee saying to me once that Cassavetes was a huge help to him because of John's spontaneity and the way he'd chop and change things and bringing stuff to Lee that Lee could, could work off of, and really kind of brought the conflict of the dozen in a single voice to him.
Charlie Bronson was a very unique guy.
I remember that when we started filming, everybody was afraid of Charles Bronson. Everybody was very intimidated by him.
Charlie Bronson had instructions to get his hair cut. And just before we started shooting, he still hadn't got it done. Everybody else was buzzed out of their head. Bob Aldrich is on the telephone at the end of the table. He said, Charlie, I have your lawyer on the line in California. He wants to know whether you're going to get your hair cut or he should come over and cut it.
I don't think he wanted to be in England. I don't think he was particularly happy with life at that time. And he was pretty well morose through the whole movie.
Telly Savalas, I mean, I don't know anybody that could have done the part as well as he did.
Telly was interesting because he brought another edge to the story that it really needed. And in a way, I think on set, Telly was almost like that a bit.
At one level, Dirty Dozen is really a male testosterone-driven picture, and you have a lot of actors coming from different kinds of genre forms. Clint Walker coming from the Western.
Working with Clint Walker, I'd never met him before, but I used to watch him a lot on Cheyenne, his big series on television.
It was like a vacation to me, I was used to television where, I was in almost every scene and you had to get 14 pages a day, whereas when you're shooting a picture like that, if you get 4 or 5 pages a day, boy, you're doing great.
Jim Brown, the greatest football player of all time up to that point, maybe even generally of all time. And this was the moment in which he decides to go into the movies instead, to leave his career.
Bob was an insane football fan. And I think he would have done anything to spend a couple of months with Jimmy Brown just to talk about football.
I had a great opportunity because of him, Any other director, I don't know if it would have worked because I didn't have a lot of experience at the time.
Bob Aldrich sort of deleted some of our parts to make room for Jim. In fact, I was supposed to do a rain dance and didn't get to do it. And I was very disappointed.
It was great for me right from the beginning because every one of those guys adopted me and helped me. It's almost like having, 15 acting coaches because I was a rookie, you know. And if they wanted to destroy me, I would have never been able to get a word out.
So I think there's quite a lot of pressure on him. A lot of pressure. And I think he felt it amongst all these actors. I think he did a very nice job. He certainly enjoyed London when he was there.
It was one of the best times of my life from the standpoint of working on something that I like and the nightlife.
We played some football, but scary when he'd come running at you, I tell you.
And then there were people in it who were just present. Like Trini was in it for personality. Trini had a kind of lightness, and so we fit in for varieties.
Trini Lopez was a very, very important singer.
My agent at that time, he didn't want me to do the film. And I said, why? And he said, because, you know, you've never really done any acting, and I think you're going to get lost in the shuffle with all those big stars. And I said, the old saying is, if you want to learn how to swim, you have to jump in the pool. And so that's exactly what I did.
Ken Hyman said, I got a little problem. I said, what is it? He said, Bob Aldrich is going to show up next week, and we didn't have any actors to see for the second half of The Dozen, which we're not bringing from New York. I made a bunch of calls and put together a list of people for Aldrich to see. And it wasn't a big list, so that pleased Bob because he found the 6 people that he wanted very quickly.
Auditions came up, and actually I was there ready to audition.
This was the biggest break of my career. Call came through about Dirty Dozen. Would I go for an interview? So I said, oh, wow, yeah, meet Robert Aldrich. Wow.
He was just an awesome man, you know.
I think the interview probably lasted about 10 minutes. And there we were. I was cast. So that was not quite my first professional role, but it was pretty close.
I was hired as an extra. It was the best job I ever had. I had one line.
The fresh faces were fillers, if you will. They had to be competent, obviously. They had to be interesting looking. Some of them went on to build exciting careers.
When we went to rehearsals, we were all there, and it was at MGM Studios on one of the sound stages in London.
We had rehearsal period around this great big table covered with green cloth, like a pool table. It was a huge, long thing.
There was a chair for every actor with their character's name on the back of the chair. And in front of each of the chair was the most beautiful red leather-bound script and script cover with the Dirty Dozen.
The whole cast sat around with Kenneth Hyman and Bob Aldrich, and we went through the whole script.
I think the magic happened the first day I saw the cast together. I mean, walking through the rehearsals, the chemistry was very exciting.
We had 2 weeks of reading, talking, training that we continually showed up for every day. It was taken very seriously.
They just went all out with it.
We did a lot of rehearsals. Saves a lot of time on camera.
I think it was a big help for everybody getting acquainted with each other and learning who was playing what characters, and a lot of script changes were going on the back of the rehearsal and during the rehearsal.
I mean, I was given a wonderful opportunity because Clint Walker, who was playing Posey, the character was a Native American, and Clint interrupted the proceedings because we were reading through the script and said, Mr. Aldrich, I think it is incorrect in my position as a star in Hollywood and someone representing the American Indian people to play this stupid scene where I have to pretend to be a general. And Bob Aldrich looked up and looked down the table and said, you with the big ears, you do it. And that changed my life completely. Ingo Preminger saw that scene and gave me MASH.
The very first day of working together, Lee Marvin had just come back from winning the Academy Award.
He'd been nominated for Capaloo. And on the next day of rehearsal, when we all arrived on time, Lee had already shown up. And he was sitting in his chair at the head of the table right next to Bob's chair. The Oscar was plonked right on the green felt. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and he probably had far too much to drink. And he just sat there with this Oscar. Everybody congratulated him, of course. He didn't say a word, but it was just an unbelievable moment. It was wonderfully cute and totally in the Lee Marvin style.
Lee Marvin and I were working back and forth. And they said, okay, let's take 5. So we went outside, and this one man came by, one of the cast, and he said, I wonder what 2 Academy Award winners have to say to each other. And without missing a beat, he looked up and said, "You'll never know," and went right on talking. And I looked at him aghast. I said, "How can this man be like that?" But that was Lee Marvin, you know?
Lee was in his drinking period during Dirty Dozen, and Lee could drink a lot of alcohol. And it seldom affected his work, but he was at war with the producer.
Lee was slowing the production down. Charlie was going to kill Lee. He was physically going to attack Lee. I said, "Charlie, wait till the picture's finished."
I remember the difficulties was mainly what they call the bloody weather in England. We would go on location, drive way out, and we wouldn't shoot 1 foot of film because we couldn't see in front of our faces.
I remember nobody did what they did in the rehearsal. Nothing was done that was actually done in the take. And just before the take, all kinds of things changed. Chewing gum, jackets were taken off, all kinds of stuff appeared and disappeared because everybody was doing their thing, you know, trying to be an individual in a line of 12.
When I used to line up my boys, mid-dozen, and I'd go down the line like a sergeant major, checking their costumes at the buttons, you know, you'd got 2 done up. Well, I'd get from one end to the other, and I've done them all. But of course, by the time I got to the end of the row, the top is now mainly Mr. John Cassavetes, being a method actor. Of course, he's all undone again.
In every scene that we had, the Dirty Dozen lineup, Aldrich allowed a lot of freedom. And Cassavetes was always doing something.
I'd never know what would come out of John's mouth, nor would anybody else, from take to take.
We would be riding in the car on the way to location, and one morning I said, "John, I've been watching your dailies, and I think you're going to be nominated for an Academy Award." And he thought I was crazy. He says, "Trini, what are you talking about?" I said, "I'm telling you, that's all. I'm just saying this, you know." And he was the only one that was nominated for an Academy Award for the Dirty Dozen.
We certainly shot a lot of film.
Bob Aldrich believed in doing a master, as every director does, and he would then do a take from every conceivable angle. If it was just a simple 2-person shot, he would get a crane and he'd shoot directly down, he'd dig a pit and he would shoot up. And of course, this added to the overall length of the movie. I'm sure it must have driven the producer mad when he saw that once again they were dropping behind schedule. But that was his way. And he was a master craftsman, and it showed, I think, in the film.
The picture was running really, really late. My contract was for 4 months. And I stayed 3 extra months, and the picture was not even half completed. And Frank Sinatra was in London, and he invited me to dinner. And he said, "I understand that your film is really running late." And I said, "Yes, they are." And he said, "Well, you know," he said, "you're really hot with your career, and the public is very fickle. I think they'll forget about you." And he said, "I think you should go back to your career." And I said, "Well, do you mean I should leave the film?" He says, "Yes."
So he came back to Bob Aldrich and said, I'm gone. I'm finished. You know, you've gone over your time. I'm done.
And so we all showed up for the scene in the forest, and we were waiting around, and we noticed it's 11 of us. Well, where's Trini? And finally, somebody shows up and whispers into Bob Aldrich's ear. More consultations going on. Finally, it's announced to us that Trini has pulled out of the movie, and we're going to have to rewrite that scene.
Trini came to the screening that night, even though he was done. And he looked at the picture and he said, "Oh, shit. Mr. Aldrich, I would like to come back and play this and finish the role." And Bob Aldrich said, "You're hanging in a tree, Trini. You know, you're out of here."
Carol Rosenblum, who owned the Cleveland Browns, visited the set one day, wanted to get Jimmy to come back to play football.
Scott Modell really made a mistake because he gave me an ultimatum. You know, when you're making a movie, you don't leave. You know, that's one of the laws of being an actor. And so I retired on the set of The Dirty Dozen, called a press conference, and announced my retirement.
The film was shot to some extent in sequence. So the chateau, which more or less is the end of the movie, we shot late October on overnight shoots.
Bob had these huge white cards, and he wrote on these cards all the various pieces of action because he had so much to cover. That whole chateau sequence, I mean, I don't know how many cuts are in it, but it's huge.
I think the chateau build was probably around 16 weeks, something like that, from the riggers going in and the plasterwork going on top. Although the chateau was only to be seen at night, it didn't mean that the finish in any way was made easier because of that. The finish still had to look very good.
I was there when they were shooting. They had the chateau set up, and I was just overwhelmed by what the chateau said. I mean, I came around between some caravans and looked up, and there it was, right out of my head.
I will always remember where the big blow-up is to happen. There must have been half a dozen cameras there, so there's Ariflexes everywhere.
The chateau had to have sections of it pre-built and planned so that when it exploded, the front of it, over the door, balcony, all sort of came away with an explosion, so it had to look convincing.
Robert Aldrich says, now look, you guys, when this goes up, I want you to flinch. Don't just sort of look at it. It's supposed to be a big explosion. Well, we didn't have to act at all. They set so much explosives in this thing that when it went up, we nearly dove under a rock to get away from the thing. Boy, did it blow up.
We were about, 25 miles out of London, and London heard the boom. A lot of complaints from the neighbors.
I thought that Aldrich was a lot gutsier than I was in the ending he made of the movie.
At the time, people said, this is so violent, this is terrible, we don't want to see this kind of film, even though it was the biggest grosser of the year.
It saved MGM's ass. It really did. They were going down the tubes.
1967, this is another kind of cusp that Aldrich wanders into by luck or by chance or premeditation or whatever it is. It's Black Power. This is when Black Power comes in 1967.
I love the character because the character had a lot of dignity, and it was almost a breakthrough at the time for a black actor. Bob was so conscious of what was going on in the country, and I think he was very careful in the movie to make sure that my character, had the dignity.
The anti-authoritarian piece of the film was lucky timing. The timing just worked. The timing for the movie worked. 5 years earlier, 5 years later, it might not have been as big a success.
The film is still popular today. It's referenced in movies. It's referenced in TV shows. Everyone knows what the Dirty, even if you haven't seen it, everyone knows the title Dirty Dozen. But I think on a subtler level, one thing that Aldrich did with that film was to say that you could make an anti-war film within the system and still have it be an anti-war film.
Bob and I had a very tenuous but strong friendship. I told the truth and he told the truth. Now, two guys who tell each other the truth in the film business can be very rough and rocky. And it was, but it was also wonderful. He's a big loss, a huge loss.
I suppose probably I have regret Bob asked me to do another picture, and I didn't do it, and I really owed it to him to do it, because MASH had come out, and it would have been good for me to have done it for him. And I regret that. I really do. I regret because I was rushing off to do other things that I thought, and I just didn't recognize how truly important he had been in my life as a man. I have huge affection for him.
I owe a lot to Bob Aldrich, in the sense that a director called Delbert Mann, who directed Marty, came down to get some pointers from Bob Aldrich. And when he came down, of course, he had the script of Marty under his arm, and Bob Aldrich said, "May I read the script?" I said, "Sure." He read it, and at a party a couple of weeks later, Bob Aldrich was asked by the producers of Marty who, in his estimation, could play that part. Did he know of any actor? He says, I know of only one actor, he said, Ernest Borgnine. Well, he's a killer. He stabs people in the back, and he kills and shoots, and he said, don't kid yourself. He's an actor, and he can do it. So they said, well, let's take a chance. And the rest is history, thanks to Bob Aldrich.
Bob Aldrich had a huge impact on me as a young actor and a potential director, and I probably learned more watching Bob. People ask me about directing, where you go to school. I did it on The Dirty Dozen.
Dirty Dozen was a hit from the instant it showed up until today. It still plays, and the audiences are phenomenal because Dirty Dozen stands up. It was a great film.